So one thing, it's kind of weird having people who are from Hollywood do movies on religion. I don't like it. Um, it's pretty obvious why, but especially Jesus. So when you have a guy like Mel Gibson, I mean, he's connected to a lot of filthy stuff in Hollywood. A lot of he's done movies with a lot of actors who are filthy, and so I'm just in a symbolic way. It's like, Hol- like Hollywood producing a movie about God is just weird. Now I have a movie. It's just called Jesus, and I think it was made in the 1990s. It could be even the 70s. And I think it was just directed by a group of Christians. I don't know. I don't think they had very many ties to Hollywood. Maybe they did. And that kind of just feels better on a symbolic level. I just don't want Hollywood making movies. Anyway, if you go and watch Passion of the Christ, it's really about the physical part of Jesus. And you got to be careful with that, right? Because if you read the scriptures, it says, the physical doesn't profit. He did suffer physically, and that's important. And it's important. Everything that we suffer physically is important too. And but here's the thing: taken in context with what everybody sees, like everybody watches movies where people are being tortured. You know, so it's kind of like in your mind, or in a lot of people's minds, they could be watching the Passion of the Christ and they're like, oh, this guy's being killed. Well, seen that. Oh, this guy's being tortured. Well, seen that. So think about this. In a way, watching Passion of the Christ could lessen your view of Jesus, because you could just be watching it and you're like, well, other people get tortured. And this is something that I've had to think about because um, I just I believe in a resurrection for some reason. Like, why do I believe that? I don't know. I believe that God can heal us. Why do I believe that? I don't know. But I don't understand how God was up in heaven and he's like, okay, well, I'm going to send this guy down. I mean, okay, he's the firstborn. Okay, well, you know what? You know what? It's like, so what? You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, he's really righteous. He really loves me. Um, he really loves all of you. He's your leader. He's your eldest brother. Okay. Well, he's going to go down and he's going to suffer so much that his suffering will cleanse you from all your sins. His suffering will repair you. And it's like, okay. And it's just weird to me. I don't read the scriptures enough. I'm not like a good Christian, so maybe it would make more sense to me. And I understand the concept that, like, the universal, I don't know if I want to use that word from NASA, but the eternal principle of suffering gives life to others. So all mothers suffer to create a baby, to create a human. Like all mothers suffer. Um, Mothers used to die giving birth. That used to be very common. So that's very Christ-like. That's very symbolic. So I can understand what Jesus did wasn't like out of the blue or totally strange, weird thing that he did. Um, if that makes sense. So, it was like I can understand the principle, but at the same time, here's one thing I think is weird about his suffering: how he suffered more than anyone else. Like, That's what we're taught. He suffered more. He suffered the most. Is even if he suffered an immense amount of pain that night or whatever, it's like there's people who suffer like they suffer a lot over weeks and months, and they suffer so many different trials. I mean, there's people that have skin conditions, break bones, get tortured, and are tortured longer than Jesus was tortured. And so I guess what it means is this. If you have a disease or a problem and it's intense, there's a line, or there's a level where your body will deal with it for a certain amount of time. So it's not too intense that you're going to die. And a lot of people have that. Some people have chronic pain, and it's just like so intense. I guess what happened to Jesus is, for a certain amount of hours before in the garden, in the land, in the night, for a certain amount of time. Now remember, he was half God. He experienced crushing bones and tearing his joints out and all the physical stuff. I guess he must have experienced, like having his head pulled off and having his head torn slowly and his eyes ripped, like he must have experienced all of those things. And maybe God did it to him. In other words, you can experience any pain without actually having that thing happen. You can experience burning flesh without actually having fire on your flesh, because everything you experience is in your brain. Remember that. Think about that. There's, like, if your hand's burning, if your brain doesn't receive that, you don't feel it. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird if you think about that. And I think maybe that's one thing about what the atonement was doing, is God just went into Jesus's brain and made him feel burning, made him feel breaking bones, and getting his teeth knocked out, and getting his nose ripped, and all these things. And so here's what I'm saying: he must have experienced a crushing body and all these pains over a couple hours or whatever. So after that, when people experience a broken bone, he's like, I know what that's like, a fire or a headache or whatever. So this is what I'm saying. If you've experienced the most extreme pain you can experience in 3 hours, then you can tell people, I've suffered more than you, right? Now, he can't say I suffered it as long as you did, because some people have chronic pain for 10 years. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing that's kind of weird about Jesus's story, is it's like he can say, I've suffered more than you, but he can't say, I suffered as long as you have. And that's kind of what trips me up about Jesus. Well, maybe he can say that. Maybe he can say, I've suffered as long as you have. Because I know one thing about suffering mentally, like suffering, like just pressure, is like, people could say like a mom of 4, or a mom who's experiencing all these trials, or a dad, and he has a lot of pressure in business, and people who have mental pressure for years or decades. There's one thing that they can't tell Jesus, is he doesn't understand that. Because think about it. When did Jesus know he was going to suffer more than anybody else? Like maybe when he was a teenager. Even if it happened when he began his ministry. Could you do that? Could you set out to do something knowing it's going to result in you being tortured in 3 years? Nobody would do that. Even if it was to save your children, you know what I'm saying? Even if. And here's the trippy thing about what he did. So let's say he did know. Let's say he did know in 3 years he's going to be tortured. I mean, he if he didn't, okay, that would change the stress that he would have. But let's say he knew that he was going to be crucified, and he would see every day people being crucified. Do you think you could just be calm all the time and just be chill? And he would enjoy dinners with people. Do you think you could focus on other people? When I'm under a lot of pressure, I'll tell you what, I become a black hole. And I just become, all about me, and I just get away from everybody. You know what I'm saying? It's like, man, I gotta be like Jesus, man. Like, he was because think about it, like under pressure. Could there be more pressure knowing you're going to be tortured to death in 3 years? Oh, okay, here's what I'm saying. If you knew you were going to be tortured to death in 3 years, how effective would you be in your life? I mean, you'd probably need some pills and drugs, and you'd be flipping out. Like, wouldn't anybody? Oh yeah, you're going to be tortured in 3 years. Carry on. Go eat dinner with people. Go teach people. Go help people. Don't focus on yourself. You're always worried about your problems. Oh, well, I got problems. I don't feel well. Oh, my leg hurts. Oh, well, if I spend my time helping people, I'm not going to be able to help myself, and it's like, that's one thing that non-Christians don't realize about Jesus is like non-Christians or worldly people, they're all about like taking care of themselves, escaping problems. I mean, there's people that want to escape their children because they're stressful, and it's like, dude, being a Christian is a whole, like if being an authentic, real Christian, that's a whole different mindset, man. That's not like run away. That's not like, because Jesus, he could have gone to India, man. Right? You just think about it. I mean, he could have, the boy could have, he could have pulled a Jonah, right? He could have gone off somewhere and just had good times, had sex, and he could have been rich. He could have been a teacher. There's so many things he could have done, and it's like, wow. He teaches me, hey, you do good to people, even if you know something bad is going to come about it. Because he did say, "Bless those that curse you." He blessed the Israelites. He blessed the Jews with the teachings of God and the priesthood and apostles. He blessed them, and then they cursed him, and then they cursed him. See, I always used to think of that verse as like, if somebody curses you, then bless them. And now I'm like, he pre-blessed someone who cursed him. That's even harder. Can you imagine how hard that would be? What if someone was going to kill your kid and you knew it? Would you bless them? Because he's talking about curse. He's saying if somebody's going to curse you, like a curse is a traumatic event. Somebody does something very traumatic to you. If you knew someone was going to injure you or steal from you or hurt your wife or whatever, would you bless them? I mean, this is something to think about. Does God bless people knowing they're going to hurt children? He does. He doesn't approve of it, but if you think about it, God pre-blesses wicked people. He blesses people even though he knows they are going to hurt other people. And that's trippy. I mean, that's just